Hey class, so this is going to be one of the core exercises to help improve your control and ability to do specific fine details, things like that. It's similar to the introduction to the brush tool and some of the things we're going to do, but you'll do it with a regular pen and or pencil. But I want you to consider doing this with a pen because want you to just commit as opposed to being tempted to grab an eraser at any point and make corrections. That is not the point. It's not about doing this right per se and that you want to be able to fix it. You just keep going. But there is a goal, which is a certain amount of control and precision. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to split up our working page into some sections. Now, one of the first things we're going to do is work on doing sustained longer lines. And this will be an opportunity to exploit some of the things I'm teaching you about how to control your drawing hand. So remember that for longer lines, it's easier to maintain a smooth line using the pivot of your elbow. So you're locking up your wrist and fingers. You don't want to be moving them around. You'll want to be holding your drawing tool fairly vertical to the paper, not at a severe angle. The more of an angle you have, with a pencil, you'll get a fatter line quicker. It'll start wearing down and giving you a wider edge. If you do it upright, it'll stay narrower quicker, or longer, I should say. It'll stay narrower or longer. And with a pen, most pens, if you hold your hand out at an angle and draw, the line will break up and it won't be consistent in weight. You want to hold it fairly vertically. So, first thing you're going to do is freehand 3 straight lines. You could do 4, or actually several more, but 3 different lengths is the key point. The first is just going to be about 1 inch, as straight as you can make it. Well, that's actually more like 1.5 inches. And the next one's going to be twice that, again as straight as you can make it. And the third is going to be all the way as straight as you can maintain it across the page. Now, once you've marked those 3, I want you to return to them as many as 10 times. And just simply, carefully, remain relaxed, don't go too slow, retrace. Now, a lot of this is just about being able to acquire the precision to revisit the exact same line and stroke as many times as you can. I have not been counting because I'm talking to you, but the idea would be to do this as many as 10 times per line. Now, for that one, I'm mostly just using the stroke of my wrist. For this, we're now going to drag more. We're using the elbow movement, the paper to accommodate that a little bit. Now, don't go slowly. Don't go too fast either. I don't want you to quickly stroke it and have a stroke you have no control. I do not want to see this. Do not do that. Don't go too slow because you'll get wiggly. Go nice and consistent. If you miss it a little, it's okay, don't stress it, but you're trying to acquire the exact same stroke each time, just making it heavier and darker by doing it over again, over again. Find the speed that you're most comfortable at. Work at that speed. If you find over time that you can go faster while maintaining the precision, then speed up. But don't do it until you're ready. Don't rush it. Focus on a steady, consistent, and even pace. Remember, 10 times each. I'm not sure if I did that earlier, but that is what you do for this exercise. And for this last one, let's move the camera. So I'm moving this partially because I want to make sure, especially for this long stroke, that my elbow is firmly rested on the table because I want a clean pivot. If I had it off the table, it'll float a bit and I'll have a hard time maintaining. So I'm looking for a nice clean purchase. It's off the shot here, but I've got my elbow in something. And I'm lifting the rest of my hand. I'm not pulling the whole weight of my arm across the page. For one thing, that'll cause a lot of smudging. But I also want a fairly swift and clean movement, and the easiest way to do that is to have lift your hand up, and you want to be holding your pencil very vertically. I wasn't doing that actually for the last one. Bad, Max. Vice and vertical. If you need to, use your pinky as just a stabilizer. You don't want to be pressing it too hard to the table. I actually use a bit of my nail so that it's sort of smooth. And remember to ghost out and orient the stroke. And something to remember, that if you're making a nice long line like this, think of the orientation of your arm like a T, like this. You want to find the middle of where the line's going to be. And that drawing line back is where the elbow should line up. When your arm is pointing straight up, direct to the middle, should line up to make a nice right angle T. And that gives you the best angle of attack for the whole line. So prepare your stroke. Try to maintain it. You will notice, and this is how you learn to accommodate for the curvature that occurs with your arm. See, if I don't move, if I don't adjust, and I just follow the natural stroke of my arm, I get a slight curvature in the line. See? Because really, I'm like acting like a giant compass. So for this exercise, I'm learning to bring the pencil in and actually bring it out as smoothly as I can to correct for that line and get as straight a line as I can. And 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 strokes. So do it with pencil, but also do it with pen. You'll notice slight differences in the property of friction, and you want to really be aware of the fact that you're not pressing on the paper any harder than you need to make a mark. And any more resistance that you create by pressing on the paper is finesse and control you're robbing from yourself, your ability to create a more subtle line. Plus, a lot of these pens have the property of being able to do varying weight depending on how hard you press. You want to be able to maintain that. So for this case of making these strokes, you want to keep it even, so you want to keep a very even stroke weight as well as where it places on the page. So I'm not going to draw over these, I'm going to draw next to them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and now we're going to do the same for the next 2 lines, but now with pen. I'm just trying to keep it steady and even, and retrace the previous line as exact as you can, while not going too slow or too fast. The next thing you're going to do is circles and ellipses. And give yourself a roll. You can use a ruler for this, but I'm just going to make a line, and then another. I'm using the distance here as a guide. We're just going to draw rows and rows of circles on these of different sizes, starting small and then getting bigger. So start by getting your circular motion going with your hand. Get loosened up. You want to try to make them as even and consistent as possible. You know, I'm missing the connection in some places. That's okay, but try for exacting. These are kind of sloppy because I've been doing this regular. But the more regularly you do it, the more precise your control will be generally. Again, don't go too slow and careful. If you try too carefully to perfectly make your circle, you're going to end up with a and it won't be. It'll look even less round. A nice, quick. So with each row, the circles will get larger. I want to keep them even and smooth. I'm going to speed this up because I won't make you watch me fill an entire page, but I'd like you to fill at least this size of a section. Don't get caught up in overworking them. Just make it one quick, smooth stroke. Round and end. Now, there's a difference between how they look and whether they actually are perfect. All right, so what I'm going to do with the rest of this page, I'm going to work on some textures. So make myself first just a little cell, a row, half the page there. Let's first think about just a basic dark to light gradation using vertical lines. I'm going to do a diagonal vertical line, and the first few I want to keep them very close together but not touching. Getting wider apart, keeping them consistent. I'm moving my hand away. I have to be kind of unconsciously careful about it. So if I think about it too much, I'm going to screw it up. But gradually getting wider. And we're just looking at refining our control and making repetitive, consistent lines and getting a particular kind of gradation going. Others, let's do little pebbles for this is like fine circle control. You can create organic patterns. Don't hold your pen too close to the tip. It'd be very tempting to get more control by getting too close. You want to get a bit of room. I try to stay, back behind where the cap lands. On my brush pen, sometimes I hold it tighter for greater precision, but it's always a mistake to get too tight because you lose a lot of your range of expression. So the idea with a pattern like this is just to experiment with how orderly and how random it is. Of course, good old cross-hatching. Or actually, no, what I'm going to do is kind of organic basket weave. It's a great texture. Can be used for a great deal of different surfaces. If you really organize it so that it's all just at right angles, it becomes your classic basket weave. When you keep it kind of random organic, you get an interesting, loose, more abstract textural pattern. What I'm going to do experiment is a bit with feathering with the pen. When you have a felt tip pen like this, start not pressing too hard, but just a little hard and lifting. Make a flicking stroke. See how much control you can get doing that. Do rows of them. If you get it right, the effect you should get should be like waves. Of dark to light. By making a flicking motion, I'm lifting, so I get a finer end on one end of the line and a heavier one on the other. Just like if you're feathering with a brush. The remaining space, I'd like you to first kind of play with just creating an abstract doodly form. Say something like that. Now, it really could be anything. And then once you've done that, just pretend that there's a center line through it like this. This one kind of feels like it has one that way. And the reason you're doing that is to help orient. So let's imagine now that this is a mass, a volume, sort of an organic rounded volume. And make yourself a few contour lines this way. So you're now turning this abstract blob into a three-dimensional contour exercise. Now, you know, this is kind of like when you look at CGI 3D objects and they draw a grid to describe the surface. But you don't want to make it too busy by doing a whole grid. You just need enough information to tell you what's going on here and here and here. So now we've done that. Think about, let's say the light source is there, going down. It's always sometimes good to give yourself a little note for a light source for a project like this. And light's casting that way. So shadows are there and there. And the light source is here. This one's gonna have shadows like that. What we never did do. Imagine for these, at some point it's probably a good idea to switch either to pen or another color so you can see what you're doing as you refine. I want a softer pencil. There we go. It's an H. Try to do lines like that versus what I just did. Continuous single stroke, not too fast, not too slow. Rather than building out of hairy bits, you'll get a much better line with a bit of practice that way. And you could turn these into things, but actually I'm going to encourage you not to. Sometimes just do simple little looking like this and then move on and do a bunch more. Just for the exercise of thinking it out quickly and in brief. We're going to have another doodle exercise where we play with abstract forms in a little more depth. This one, just give yourself a little problem by creating the doodle and resolve it. How am I going to describe this shape? And you know, another thing, we're working on lighting this way. You can always give yourself some marks for the highlights where the light's hitting. If you're working on a colored paper, you can use some white gel ink for that, or whiteout. And think about your shadow, and then think about the cast shadow. If this is here and it might look something like that. Darkest at its core. This one's a bit soft, so I'm just going to let it fade out so we don't have to worry about the edges too much. And if you want to turn these into things, you know, think about monsters or spaceships, or you know, let your imagination go wild. But again, for the exercise, mostly, I don't want you to turn this into anything or get too complicated, fussy with it. Just invent forms and give them three-dimensionality, depth, shape. This one's going to be like right on the surface. It's not floating. Notice how just by giving these a couple of shadows that treat them like they're in the same space, so this one's closer to the surface than that one, I've also created the beginnings of a sense of depth to this. You don't need to get into perspective a lot of times to suggest spatial depth. So do this lots, rinse, repeat.